I'm Chris Lee at the 14. I'm joined by Blake Lovell today as we break down a little off-season basketball news. All the talk on football, Blake, but some big stuff happened in the SEC over the weekend and not in a good way.
Yeah, particularly for two teams that, I think I said it when we did our kind of summer stuff in basketball. I said I thought right now I've probably a good chance I could put Alabama and Auburn 1-2 in the SEC. I think Kentucky, Tennessee will factor into that equation. But that was kind of my thought. But now for both teams, you've got some pretty significant injuries with Nimari Burnett at Alabama out for the season, torn ACL. And you talk about a team that is just, it's incredible to think about, like for Alabama, that really the past couple of years, of course, last year was the one where they really, took it to a different level. But that program has gotten a lot of injuries, preseason.
Oh my goodness, knee stuff left and right.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know the number. I know people put out the number. I can't tell it off the top of my head. I can't remember what it was, but it's happened every preseason, I want to say, for 3 or 4 years now. And, he's someone we talked about with Burnett. We thought he would come in, and former 5-star kid that, probably was initially considering Alabama, went to Texas Tech, didn't work out, great, wouldn't seem like the best fit, but now comes Alabama, seems like a great fit for his playing style, and boom, he's out for the year. And they have the depth, though. That's one of the things to keep in mind with Alabama. They have more depth, I think, than anybody in the SEC. So I think that is something. And then for Auburn, I think Auburn's depth is comparable in that regard. But I think the difference with Burnett and Flanigan is, I think Flanigan's probably, second, third best player maybe on that team. I don't know where you would rank him. I think that's probably hard to do off the top of my head too. But like he had a huge year last year, and now for him to be out, I think 12 to 14 weeks. So I guess that probably puts him back at, was that early next year? I would guess.
Well, let me give you. This is not apples to oranges, right? But I'm a Braves fan, and so I've watched Mike Soroka, who was their erstwhile ace of the staff. I remember watching him pitch last year. And I was watching him as he tore his Achilles, and he walks off the mound, and his season's done, and the hope is he's back May this year. Well, he tears it again. And hope to God that this ends better for Alan Flanigan than it did Mike Soroka. But look, I'm not going to say you don't have a lot of strain on pitching, right? But, I don't think there's any strain on an Achilles, like all the movement, the jumping, the side to side with basketball. And so I'm concerned for him just for that. That's a tough one to get back from.
Yeah, I guess, and I just had to look it up. Like 12 to 14 weeks, that's the expectations. That puts him out about 3 months, I guess. So I guess right? If you're gonna have that injury, you'd rather have it now than in the middle of the season. So that's probably the expectation, I assume, is that he comes back in December, January. But like you said, there's a lot that, you have successful surgery, you come off of that. That's still a big injury, and I think it's something where, it's obviously not more significant than the one we talked about with Burnett. But Flanigan's I'm very intrigued by him this year because I think he could really have another big year, even though they're supporting cast this year. They've got a more well-rounded supporting cast there at Auburn, and I think that will be something to see. Maybe his numbers aren't what they were last year, but I still think he's going to have a really good year. And so that's a significant loss for them, I think, early in the season. But like we said, at least the expectation for Auburn is that they're going to get him back pretty soon into the year. Whereas, for Alabama, now that Burnett's out for the season. So,
what was the severity of the injury there? And maybe every injury is not apples to apples, right? What happened to Soroka may not be what happened with Flanigan. But do you know the severity of the tear there?
I'm not sure exactly, I guess, on the specifics. I just know that they did come out and say, he did have successful surgery. I think it was the right Achilles. I'm pretty sure that was the one. But it's one of those things that we do see this a lot, of course, in basketball, because we know that's an important sort of area when you talk about just all the things in basketball and everything that sort of comes along with it. So, hopefully, like we said, he's someone that we talked about a lot towards the end of last season, really stepped up, with them not having Sharif Cooper. And it was a tough year for Auburn. We knew it was going to be different. But he really stepped up and emerged as, one of the best players in the SEC. We talked about, I don't remember if we put him in our Final 14, but he was right there on the edge if we didn't. He's going to be I think he's gonna have another really good season, and I think the fact that he has a better group around him in terms of a lot more talent, I think that'll open up even a lot more things for him. So.
Yeah, if we had put weight last year in our 14 on what's a guy doing right at the time, I think Flanigan would have been in that 14. That we have to go on body of work because we won't want to short somebody for season-long contributions, but he carried them at times at the end of the year when Sharif Cooper was out. I just thought that he would take over games. I think Tennessee, I remember watching that one, and they're playing in Auburn, and Auburn's a pretty significant underdog, and he carries them to a win. I mean, you said that you didn't know that he's maybe Auburn's second or third best player. I was just thinking in my mind, and maybe I'm forgetting somebody, especially with the transfers coming in, you tend to do that, or at least I do. I'm thinking, I don't know who on Auburn's team I liked more than him, first of all. And two, I'm thinking, like, if I'm doing a short version of SEC Player of the Year going to the season, just based on the way that he carried them a year ago, I don't know that he's the pick for Player of the Year in the league, but I'm guessing if I had to put together off the top of my head 8 or 9 guys, I mean, I think he would have been on my list, Blake.
Yeah, I think I think it's him and Jabari Smith from Auburn. Like, I think those are the two. I mean, I guess unless there's someone else too that I'm forgetting in that group. And again, we're not going through the entire roster. We're just talking about guys that probably have the best potential to, let's say, be a Player of the Year candidate off that team. I think it's one of those two. So yeah, I mean, and then that's what I mean. Again, like, you think about someone who did a little bit of everything too, right? Like, think about just with his size and the position he plays, and I mean, he can do a lot of different things. So I think that's another one too. Like, I can't say that I've completely jumped into Auburn's non-conference schedule just yet. I don't even know if they've released it because, as we know, like, keeping up with non-conference schedules can be a very hard thing to do. But that is something that, how they play without him that first month and a half of the season, whatever it is, it'll be interesting to see. But I think once he comes back, and I also think about it though, like, that's going to give guys, the new guys, right? Like, a lot of those guys now will move into those maybe more expanded roles early in the season and have to play more minutes by necessity. And maybe that ends up paying dividends for Auburn once they get into conference play. So, maybe that gives them some chance to get those guys acclimated a little bit more because they do have a lot of newcomers. And maybe Flanigan being out, that gives them more minutes. They get more adjusted to the system and everything. And then by the time he's back, they're clicking and ready to roll. So
The Burnett one to me a little tougher to process because he was a 5-star recruit who went to Texas Tech. Now, I think he was on the low end of 5 stars, but still, that's a seriously talented player. He did not do much at Tech a year ago in terms of what was expected versus what he delivered. I don't think, shoot the ball very efficiently, so I always have some concerns with that. That said, year 1 to year 2 is when these kids take a jump, Blake. But then you throw them in the mix with all Alabama's got, and God knows Alabama's heavy with guards, and I guess he's a little bit of a different type of player, but where do you think, if he's healthy and playing the whole year, which unfortunately he's not, where would he have fit in, and how does the domino of him being out, what's the effect of that with the rest of the roster in terms of playing time?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was projection for him. We expected him to fit in, I guess, but we didn't know exactly how I think his minutes would project, even though, as we said, I mean, he would have had a chance to, I think, he certainly would have been in their top, 7. Like, he probably could have a chance to be in the starting lineup. Like, there's a lot of things. I think that he's talented enough that he would have been in that discussion. But as we said, I mean, Alabama's just, they got a plethora of guards. And I think that's where, and I think that's why Nate Oates does what he does, right? Because he goes out and gets as many guards as he does each season and has enough to where you're going to have injuries. Like, it just happens. Unfortunately, like we said, it's been a common theme for Alabama in recent seasons. But I think just the fact that they went out and now have so many guards, and that's what we talked about, the significance of Jaden Shackelford coming back, still having Javon Quinterly there. There's not a whole lot you have to change with that when you have those two guys leading the way in the backcourt. But yet now you bring in all the guys that they brought in. It's going to be, it's one less player. I think that's the way to put it. And it's one less player that probably would have helped you significantly in different areas. But I think that they have enough depth to be able to overcome that. But it is, once again, going to be kind of a situation where you're thinking, well, what if they had this guy on the floor. And again, in what we expect to be a pretty strong SEC, and perhaps the strongest it's been in several seasons, I think that, every player counts, and every player you can get, you'll take them, because it's going to be a grind for Alabama to be able to defend the SEC title.
Well, and it's not just that. It is also injuries. You only get 13 scholarship guys, right? And so they don't all play the same spot. They don't do the same things. Once you start getting a rash of injuries to a certain type of player, that's where you run into trouble. So to me, when you're a team and you have preseason injuries, Burnett's one that Alabama can survive. But like you said, they've had a lot of knee injuries. And my concern is, okay, you want to make sure you keep the rest of your guys healthy, because you're already starting the year a man down.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it's such in basketball too, right? Because we know there are 5 guys that can be on the floor at one time. And, by the end of the, non-conference, I guess, is probably where most coaches kind of get their rotation set and have a pretty good idea heading into SEC play. Like, there's not a lot of teams that are going to be playing. Not a lot of teams going to be going 10 deep. Like, you're going to cut that down a little bit. Some guys you think are going to get playing time won't get playing time. But that's where, when you have enough of those guys, like Alabama, I think we talked about this in one of the things we did during the summer. But when you do have 11 guys, perhaps, or whatever, 11, 12 guys that you could say, oh, I can see that guy playing 15 plus minutes. Like, that's where you have the luxury, I think, of being in that, spot that Alabama's in, to where if one of those guys is out with an injury, you're like, okay, next man up, even if there are a lot of things, like we said, I think Burnett could have done that, will be better than some other people on the roster. There may be some people on the roster that do better than him in certain areas. But I think overall, that's where having that depth comes in. And that's what we always say about some of these teams, where it's like, well, if they're front-loaded with 2 or 3 star players, but, maybe their next 3 or 4 aren't really on that level that can compare to other SEC teams, I don't think Alabama has that problem. I think they're 1 through 7, 8, 9, whatever. A lot of those guys, you could pick up, place on another team, and they're probably still going to play 15 to 25 minutes a game. And I think that's where they have the luxury of that. And that's what I think that's still going to put them in that race for the SEC title.
Blake, I'm going to throw it back to you to wrap us up with any parting thoughts. And, of course, I'd like you to tell folks where they can follow all the stuff we do.
Yeah, check out everything we've got. Of course, our YouTube channel. You can, follow us there, subscribe to it. We got a lot of videos we're doing now, as you can see. Football season, we got our betting videos coming up pretty much every Thursday, Friday. We'll have some sprinkled out throughout those 2 days leading into Saturday. So, yeah, subscribe to it there. Check out our website, southeastern14.com, on Twitter at 14southeastern, and we're all over the place now. What do you know? So we've got it all covered, so be sure to check it all out there, and, yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to our YouTube video today. Again, we got lots of stuff at different channels. He's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to this YouTube episode of The 14.